Atomet var indtil begyndelsen af dette århundrede anset som den mindste del af alt stof på jorden og i universet. Atomet ansås for udeleligt, som ordet betyder i sin græske oprindelse. Men opdagelserne af lyskvantet, elektronen og radioaktivitet åbenbarede, at atomet ikke var udeleligt, men at det var udtryk for en hidtil ukendt indre verden, som skulle bringe mennesket ny erkendelse og i nærmere kontakt med naturens inderste hemmeligheder. Den danske videnskabsmand Niels Bohr var en af atomfysikkens største pionerer, og hans institut i København var i en årrække midtpunktet for udforskningen af atomets gåder. Dette er historien om Niels Bohrs liv.
We have been a band of enthusiastic young persons between 20 and 30 years old in a time where a new kind of physics grew up. And we experienced, together with Niels Bohr, how science take place.
If I tried to get one single phrase to describe Niels Bohr, I would describe him as a daring conservative. Conservative in holding fast to battle-tested principles and daring in pushing their application to the very limit.
Well, I certainly think that Niels Bohr ranks among the really first-rate scientists all over the world, and I would have no hesitation to put him besides Newton, Galilei, and Darwin, Maxwell, and Einstein.
The face was somehow divided into two parts. The upper half was the high and front, and there you see the immense intensity of thought. And his eyes looking somewhere into a place where nobody of us could look at. And the lower part was, well, a very kind Danish bourgeois.
Niels Henrik David Bohr bliver født i København den 7. oktober 1885. Hans mor Ellen er datter af bankieren og politikeren David Adler, og hans far Christian er eksperimentel fysiolog og medlem af Videnskabernes Selskab. Da faren bliver professor, flytter familien ind i en lejlighed ved Kirurgisk Akademi. I kraft af farens mange aktiviteter bliver hjemmet hurtigt et kulturelt centrum, hvor byens personligheder mødes. I skolen er Niels populær blandt sine kammerater. Han er ofte langt bedre orienteret om videnskabelige sammenhænge, end det fremgår af tidens skolebøger. Niels og hans 2 år yngre bror Harald er nysgerrige tilhørere til de filosofiske og videnskabelige diskussioner, som foregår i hjemmet. Niels føler sig draget af filosofien og drømmer om at skrive store filosofiske værker. Han er optaget af sproget hos den danske forfatter Poul Martin Møller og spekulerer ofte over en bestemt sætning. At således deler mennesket sig ved mange lejligheder i 2 personer, af hvilket den ene søger at føre den anden bag lyset, imens den tredje, som i virkeligheden er den samme som de 2 andre, forundrer sig over denne konfusion. Da Niels begynder på Københavns Universitet, vælger han alligevel fysikken som hovedfag. På universitetet deltager han i en prisopgave om væskestrålernes svingninger og får tildelt en guldmedalje. Det er den helt nye udvikling, der optager ham. Relativitetsteorien, røntgenstrålerne, lyskvanter og opdagelserne af radioaktivitet. Især den nyopdagede elektron vækker hans nysgerrighed. Han finder teorierne modsætningsfyldte og beslutter, at hans doktordisputat skal være en kritisk gennemgang af metallernes elektronteori. For at få arbejdsro flytter han uden for København. Og i venners kreds træffer han apotekerdatteren Margrethe Nørlund. Og inden han er færdig med sin afhandling, er de forlovede. Det er noget af en sensation, da Niels Bohr fremlægger sin disputat på universitetet. Auditoriet og de tilstødende gange er tæt pakket med tilhørere, og opponenterne erklærer blankt, at ingen i landet har de fornødne forudsætninger for at bedømme hans arbejde. Et stipendie giver Bohr mulighed for at studere et år hos elektronens opdager, Thomson, i videnskabernes centrum, Cambridge i England. Med sig på rejsen har Bohr sin doktorafhandling, som han har fået oversat til engelsk. Den indeholder kritiske bemærkninger til Thomsons teorier, og han er fuld af forventninger til sit videre arbejde med den berømte Thomson.
Bohr never got into any real dialogue with Thomson, unfortunately. And he never actually got down to reading Bohr's thesis, which was a great disappointment to Bohr. I remember Bohr saying with a smile that also his English was not so good at the time, and so he could not express himself. He could only say to Thomson, "This is wrong."
Mødet bliver en skuffelse, og Thomson sætter Bohr til ligegyldigt laboratoriearbejde. Bohr bliver mere og mere nervøs for, at han spilder tiden. Da Bohr er allermest ulykkelig, sker der et vendepunkt. Han træffer den berømte fysiker Ernest Rutherford.
About a year before they met, Rutherford had made his most epoch-making discovery, namely that practically the whole mass of the atom is concentrated in a tiny nucleus, carrying a positive electric charge, around which the electrons are orbiting much like the planets around the sun in the solar system.
Rutherford inviterer Bohr til at arbejde i sit laboratorium i Manchester. Rutherfords atommodel er blevet kritiseret. Bohr er dog overbevist om, at Rutherfords model er rigtig. Man ser klart, at den klassiske fysiks love ikke er tilstrækkelige. Atomets verden kan ikke sammenlignes med universet. Til sine medstuderendes overraskelse rejser Bohr fra det smukke og berømte Cambridge til fabriksbyen Manchester. På universitetet i Manchester møder han nogle af atomfysikkens nye personligheder. Moseley, Geiger og ungareren Hevesy, som han slutter nært venskab med.
Bohr realized that some radically new ideas had to be introduced. And in this situation he could build on some earlier ideas of Planck and Einstein and combine these with Rutherford's atomic model.
I de sidste 4 måneder, han er tilbage i Rutherfords laboratorium, arbejder han dag og nat for at finde ud af, hvorfor atomet er stabilt, og hvordan elektronerne bevæger sig omkring atomkernen. Hvis hans teorier er rigtige, bliver de et afgørende brud med den klassiske fysik. Han skriver hjem til broren: "Det kunne være, at jeg måske har fundet ud af en lille smule om atomernes opbygning. Noget, som måske er et lille bitte stykke af virkeligheden."
This was the period where he initiated the so-called Bohr atom model, which was a tentative way of explaining atomic properties that were absolutely ununderstandable before. And even this tentative way had a tremendous success. It could completely, quantitatively explain the spectrum of the hydrogen atom and of other atoms. He could explain the so-called periodic table, that means the properties of the different elements, in a not very a logical but in a kind of intuitive way.
In Bohr's first postulate, he postulated that there are certain states of the atom, the stationary states, in which, for some reason, so far inexplicable, the electrons do not emit electromagnetic radiation. On the other hand, we know that atoms do emit radiation, like light, and so Bohr in his second postulate said that this happens by a mechanism which is entirely different from what was hitherto believed. Instead of light being emitted by the orbiting electrons, this happens by a transition from one stationary state to another. And therefore the frequency of the light, the color of the light, is not determined by the revolutions of the electrons, but by the energy difference between these two stationary states divided by Planck's constant.
Bohr kalder disse spring kvantespring. Bohr rejser tilbage til København for nærmere at udarbejde sine postulater. Han gifter sig med Margrethe og får en stilling ved universitetet. Men Rutherford vil have Bohr tilbage til sit laboratorium, og på trods af verdenskrigen rejser han og Margrethe til Manchester og træffer igen Hevesy. Rutherford forsøger at få Bohr til at blive, men Bohr vil tilbage til Danmark. Bohr har store planer. Han vil have sit eget institut for atomfysik. Ved venners og fondes hjælp står bygningen klar i 1921. De første medarbejdere kommer udefra. Vennen Hevesy, Rosseland fra Norge, Klein fra Sverige, Frank fra Tyskland og Kramers fra Holland. Hevesy og Koster finder det manglende grundstof i Bohrs nye grundstoftabel, nummer 72, som får navnet hafnium, det latinske navn for København. I 1922 får Bohr Nobelprisen. Han har nu beskrevet atomets struktur og elektronernes bevægelser omkring kernen. Men hvad der foregår i et kvantespring, ved han ikke. I Göttingen, som også er et center for atomfysik, afholdes en kongres med navnet Bohr Festspiele, hvor Bohr skal holde foredrag i hele 7 dage om sin atombeskrivelse.
My first meeting with Niels Bohr was 1922. Bohr was invited to give a 2 weeks lecture course. Many physicists attended to it from far abroad. Sommerfeld came from Munich and took a young blonde man with him, Heisenberg. He looked like a schoolboy. Heisenberg joined the discussion with very clear questions. He didn't agree to all what Bohr said, and he expressed it. Bohr took him then to works at the hills near Göttingen, and Heisenberg learned the free and more philosophical approach Bohr had to physics.
The period from 24 to about 30, in which quantum mechanics was developed. It's called now the golden years of physics. Indeed, I think it is one of the very few revolutions in science where ideas have been completely changed.
Det er gåden om kvantespringene, som nu skal løses. Fysikeren Pauli kommer fra Østrig, og den helt unge Heisenberg fra Tyskland. Atomet kan ikke beskrives ud fra hidtil kendte forestillinger. Det er et helt nyt univers. som skal erobres.
Here, Bohr has not only given the first idea how to deal with the atom, how to understand the atom, but then later he was always the leader of the development of quantum mechanics, which is now the fundamental way of looking at atoms, and it is a revolutionary way, quite different from the old physics in the 19th century and before.
Når unge fysikere beklager sig over, at de bliver svimle over at tænke på de dybder, der skal udforskes, svarer Bohr dem, at hvis man kan tænke på kvanteproblemer uden at blive svimmel, har man slet ikke forstået noget af det hele. Heisenberg, som er et matematisk geni, forlader de anskuelige billeder, men går ud fra, at elektronen skal opfattes som en partikel. Men Bohr læser en afhandling fra den østrigske fysiker Schrödinger, der mener, at elektronen skal opfattes som en bølge. Bohr har ingen ro og inviterer straks Schrödinger til København. Både bølge og partikel. Det er et paradoks, som næsten bringer Heisenberg og Bohr på kant med hinanden.
There was some difference between Bohr's attitude and Heisenberg's attitude to the problems of quantum mechanics. Bohr saw more reality in the wave aspect.
Bohr tager alene til Norge for at tænke og forstå. Han må tage filosofien til hjælp. Da han kommer hjem, har han fundet en forklaring. Lovene i atomets verden lader sig ikke beskrive i et enkelt billede. Svaret er komplementaritet.
He loved to talk about it. I mean, during the evenings, even in the midst of a scientific discussion, Bohr would come back to his beloved complementarity. And then he applied the complementarity also to non-physics, to human life, to human problems.
His basic point, I think, was that he said we are somehow suspended in language. We depend on language. And language has limited ways of expression. And therefore, in many cases, it is impossible to say things just in a unique manner. You must use two different words or two different concepts, which are mutually contradicting, but which are needed together in order to give a full description.
You have, as he used to say, a complementarity between truth and clarity. In German, there is a rhyme, Wahrheit and Klarheit. And this is so typical. If you want to say, as he says, if you really want to say the truth, you cannot be clear because the truth is so complicated.
Når en strøm af elektroner sendes mod en skærm med 2 huller, ser det først ud, som om elektronerne rammer tilfældigt. Men efterhånden dannes der et interferensmønster. Det er umuligt at sige, om elektronen har opført sig som en partikel eller bølge. Vi må lade os nøje med sandsynligheder. Hovedsædet for de endelige diskussioner om lovene i atomet, kvantemekanikken, bliver Solvay-kongresserne i Bruxelles. Einstein er utilfreds med Bohrs forklaring. Han mener, at lovene i universet og den atomare verden ikke kan være styret af tilfældigheder. Gud rafler ikke, siger han spøgefuldt, og Bohr svarer ham, at det ikke tilkommer os at fortælle forsynet, hvordan verden skal regeres.
Einstein said, what I want to have is a precise picture of reality in space and time. And quantum theory does not give me such a picture. And Bohr said, the question is not whether I have such a picture or not, the question is what I can know. And quantum theory says what I can know, and I cannot know such a picture, so I'm not introducing it.
Om dette grundlæggende filosofiske spørgsmål var de 2 fysikere helt uenige og nåede aldrig til enighed. Selvom Bohrs teorier nu er anerkendt i de fleste videnskabelige kredse, er der af stor vigtighed for Bohr at vide, om Einstein kan imødegå ham. Einstein stiller hver dag nye modbeviser op, og Bohr må arbejde hver nat på sit hotelværelse, for igen næste morgen at kunne tilbagevise Einsteins kritik. Selvom Einstein ikke er tilfreds, kan han ikke finde flere modsigelser, og Bohrs kvantemekanik bliver grundlaget for al videre atomfysik. København er blevet et centrum for atomforskning. Videnskabsmænd fra hele verden strømmer til Bohrs institut for at opleve der Copenhagener Geist, som Heisenberg kalder det.
Here I came to that place and met all this international crowd. The first time I got the idea that science is really an international undertaking. There were young people from all countries, from Russia, from America, from Germany, from England, from Italy, together there around Bohr. And Bohr led them in an interesting way. He was the first among them, of course, but he was an equal. He lived like the others, he talked like the others, and here he was surrounded of an enthusiastic crowd of young people, jocular, intensely interested in having fun. And I've never seen an atmosphere of such an activity, of such an enthusiasm, of free of all conventional bonds, and penetrating into the deepest secret of nature with a spirit of joy, of insight. I remember that they made jokes all the time, practical jokes, and we had fun all the time. And at the beginning I was a little set back by this. I couldn't quite understand it, and I talked to Bohr. Bohr always talked to the new people privately at the beginning, and I said, it's a wonderful place here, but why are people so always making jokes about, after all, very serious things? And then he made this wonderful remark. He said, there are things that are so serious that you can only joke about them.
Den russiske fysiker Gamow tegner Bohrs udvikling og fremstiller Bohr som Mickey Mouse.
The work of the Institute was adventure. Every day was a possibility of something new coming up. In a discussion, if no one produced a reaction, Bohr himself would produce the reaction. Bohr played what was almost a one-man game of tennis. We might think that such and such is the case, but if that's the case, then such and such follows. But if that follows, then that would seem to lead to such and such a consequence. But this is absolutely in contrast with what we know is the truth. Therefore, something is wrong. Therefore, we have to go back. And so, in this way, he knocked the tennis ball from his side of the court to the other, and then he ran quickly to the other side of the court and got the tennis ball and knocked it back again.
Næsten hvert efterår holdes en international konference, hvor temaet ikke er fastlagt på forhånd. Og Bohr forsøger altid at føre deltagerne ud i nye, uforudsete problemstillinger.
We told in those days Bohr has one language, the Bohrish. And this language has 3 dialects, a Danish dialect, an English dialect, and a German dialect. And the Danish dialect was not easy to be understood.
The great difficulty with Bohr was that he felt the necessity of speaking, and at the same time he didn't trust language. We used to say, when Bohr starts speaking as a lecturer, he forgets all the rules of acoustics, of grammar, and of logic. And he says things which we have heard many times, but he thinks he says them for the first time in that clarity in which he now says it. And when it becomes very, very important, then he even puts his hands before his mouth in order that nobody should understand it. He didn't know that he did it for that purpose, but we felt it was the purpose.
Bohr har viet hele sit liv til videnskaben og de mennesker, som han arbejder sammen med. Diskussioner, samvær og leg fortsætter i hans hjem og i hans sommerhus i Tisvilde.
That is typical Bohr. He was a giant of force and activity and enthusiasm, and that was contagious. Everybody who came in touch with him got some of this activity.
Bohr har en særlig intuition for at vælge de rigtige medarbejdere og få dem sat i gang med deres egen udvikling. En række af instituttets medarbejdere udfører senere store videnskabelige bedrifter, og mange får også Nobelprisen. Ikke kun i fysik, men også i biologi og kemi.
Bohr had a very interesting way of working. He always selected a person which we called the victim among us. And that victim had to sit with him all day. You have to be ready at 9 o'clock and just live with him. Sometimes you had to come out to Carlsberg, to where he lived, and then you had to sit down, and he walked around the table and discussed his ideas, and one had to write down. His thinking was done when he tried to formulate. And I remember one interesting episode there. I was working with him, and it was 6 o'clock in the evening, and I had to go home. But Bohr still had a problem he wanted to discuss with me. So he went with me to the nearest streetcar station. It was number 6 in Carlsberg. And I remember this. He went on talking and talking, and the streetcar came, stopped, and I was on the steps, and he was still going on talking. And people know Bohr very well. You know, he's sort of a well-known figure and a very venerated figure in Copenhagen. So the streetcar just waited. Nobody spoke a word. They waited until Bohr and I have finished our discussion. And then I went in and Bohr went home, and everybody looked at me like a phenomenon.
Det drejede sig nu om at forstå atomkernernes opbygning. Bohr gjorde brug af sit ungdomsarbejde om væskestråler og forestillede sig, at atomkernen havde samme egenskaber som en dråbe. Man har nu brug for et stort og kompliceret apparatur for nøjere at kunne studere atomkernen. Instituttet får installeret en højspændingsgenerator på 1 million volt og en cyklotron til at accelerere protoner. Med dette apparatur er det muligt at omdanne et grundstof til et andet. Alkymisternes gamle drøm er gået i opfyldelse. Men det er kerneomdannelsen, der interesserer fysikerne.
We could apply what we learned in quantum mechanics of the atom to the quantum mechanics in the nucleus. And there was a kind of repeat performance on a much smaller scale and much higher energy. And this development led then to the discovery of fission.
Der er tegn på uro i Europa. Nazisternes magtovertagelse i Tyskland og ikke mindst racelovene oprører alle og er i total modstrid med Bohrs tanker om internationalt samarbejde og åbenhed. Bohr, der selv er af jødisk afstamning på morens side, forsøger at hjælpe jødiske videnskabsfolk væk fra Tyskland, og mange kommer ud via instituttet i København. Hevesy kommer også tilbage, og Bohr henter den helt unge Frisch fra Hamburg, hvor han arbejder med kerneomdannelse. Da tyskerne indlemmer Østrig i det tredje rige, må også den østrigske atomfysiker Lise Meitner, der sammen med Hahn og Strassmann i Berlin arbejder på kerneomdannelse, flygte til Sverige. Frisch, som er hendes nevø, besøger Lise Meitner i Sverige, og sammen gennemgår de et af Hahn og Strassmanns uforståelige eksperimenter og forstår pludselig, at der er tale om en kernespaltning. Det er Bohrs idé om atomkernen som dråbe, der giver dem forklaringen. Bohr får overbragt den store nyhed, netop som han skal rejse til Princeton i USA.
It was a very exciting journey for a young man, and we were four brothers at that time. And that was my parents' wish that we could, each one of us, have a chance to travel with them. So they had one for himself. And it came to my turn in 1939, in the spring of 1939. I was just a student from 1938, and of course I've been preparing myself for this journey and been prepared by my parents, because I had taken a little secretarial course, typing, and I had been educated at Brødrene Andersen how to put things together in a suitcase, so nothing was very greased. So I had to do the packing and be the secretary and assistant and friend and son on this journey. Just before we were leaving, Frisch came and told him of his and this Meitner's fishing idea, and my father immediately grasped it and said how stupid we have been, and took it with him.
Bohr was coming at Princeton to give lectures on quantum theory. Everybody looked forward to it because one hoped that out of it would come some agreement between Bohr and Einstein on the subject of the quantum. No one recognized that Bohr would be told just before he left Copenhagen and come to Princeton about the news of the discovery of fission.
The days that were very hard working for my father, because he had now he had started working on fission. He had also started all this these endeavors of securing that the credit went to the right people, and it was because he was now afraid of that Meitner and Frisch wouldn't get the credit they ought to have for their idea in it.
Frisch gennemfører sit første kernespaltningsforsøg i København, og Bohr får besked.
Our work was concerned with how it came about that a nucleus could divide, and how does the probability depend upon the energy. Bohr was wonderful about each new point that came up. He first looked at it one way, and then another, as we got together a few hours almost every day. Often he would dictate the conclusions in striking words. On the blackboard, he would write with such force that the chalk cracked under his fingers and the pieces fell to the floor. I can remember our rushing up the staircase in the fine hall to the library on the top floor late at night to look up in all the dictionaries words that might be better than fission to describe the splitting of an atomic nucleus. But in the end, we decided to remain with the word fission. The 16th of March, 1939, Bohr was walking one snowy morning after breakfast across the campus of the university at Princeton and saying not a word to Rosenfeld. He had told Rosenfeld at breakfast, I have it, but not till he got to Fine Hall did he write on the blackboard the explanation in terms of the picture of nuclear fission. So in the office that had formerly belonged to Einstein, there was an informal meeting of Eugene Wigner and Leo Szilard, who had ideas about how to make a nuclear chain reaction, and Teller and myself and Bohr. And I can recall at that moment Bohr agreeing, yes, it would be possible to make a bomb in principle if one could separate the uranium-235 from the uranium-238. But he said it would take the entire efforts of a nation to do so. Of course, the idea of a bomb was somehow in the air. It had always been there. H.G. Wells had written, long before World War II, a novel in which a bomb proved decisive in a war. And it's a strange thing, it's unbelievable foresight that the material of that bomb was uranium.
Inden Bohr skal rejse tilbage, er krigen i udbrud. Bohr får tilbudt at blive i USA, men han vil tilbage til Danmark. Der er tomt på instituttet, da han kommer hjem. De fleste udenlandske gæster er rejst på grund af krigen. Mange tror, at der vil blive anvendt giftgas i krigen. Og Bohr omdanner sit institut til fabrikation af apparatur til behandling af gasforgiftede. Den 9. april 1940 bliver også Danmark besat af tyskerne.
Tyske tropper har i nat overskredet den danske grænse og har gjort landgang forskellige steder.
Bohr opfordrer regeringen til at tage afstand fra de tyske racelove.
At ordne landets forhold under hensyn til den...
Hans nære ven Heisenberg har ikke forladt Tyskland og arbejder sammen med Weizsäcker på en tysk atombombe. I 1941 kommer Weizsäcker og Heisenberg til København for at holde foredrag på det tyske institut, og Heisenberg opsøger Bohr.
We were working on nuclear energy in Germany. We had realized in 41 that most probably we would be unable to make a bomb, and we were not very eager to make one, but we knew very well that it would probably be possible in the end, and we felt it was important to get some understanding between the physicists on both sides during the war that they would agree not to make bombs. But it was quite impossible for us to contact, for instance, the American physicists, and we said the only man in the world who could reach some kind of agreement of this manner would be Niels Bohr. So we decided to go to Copenhagen.
Yes, he talked about it. In fact, I can remember waiting late at night for a taxi in the hall of the House of Honour at Carlsberg, his home, and standing in the middle of the hall, and Bohr walking very agitatedly round and round and round as he remembered the talk with Heisenberg and talked about it.
When Heisenberg came back from the talk, he said, "I am afraid it was a complete failure." And I said, "Why?" And he said, "I started very cautiously speaking about the problem of nuclear energy, and when finally he had understood what I was talking about, that I was talking about the possibility of making bombs, he became so upset about this fact that he no longer was able to listen, and so all the things I really wanted to say remained unsaid."
It upset him very much, I think, both at the time and ever afterwards, partly because of the inconsistencies, I think, of what Heisenberg said, but also, I think, by the way it was used after the war in what he regarded as an untruthful way, because there was a well-known book, A Brighter Than a Thousand Suns, by Robert Jungk, which called this visit by Heisenberg a little-known peace feeler, that Heisenberg had in effect said if all the scientists agree not to make a bomb, and that it put Heisenberg himself in the appearance of being very moral and, as it were, the person who above all felt that science should not work for war and so forth. And I think this was quite untrue.
Bohr never understood, I think, never in his life, what Heisenberg was out after in this talk. And he thought perhaps just that Heisenberg wanted to be fair to him and to tell him that we were intending to make bombs. But this was the opposite of what Heisenberg really wanted to say.
I et hemmeligt budskab i en nøgle får Bohr invitation til at komme til England for at arbejde med på et atombombeprojekt.
Niels Bohr, who had, together with John Wheeler, given a very good description of the physics of fission, showed that you could not make a weapon with natural uranium, and everybody felt very relieved. But then Frisch, who himself had done experiments about fission, who was with us in Birmingham, one day said to me, "What would happen if someone gave you a large quantity of separated uranium, separated isotope?" And we thought that out and came to the conclusion that this would have a critical size which was quite small compared to what one intuitively thought might be tons. In fact, it was kilograms. And also that its explosion would lead to a very powerful detonation. So that was the beginning of our interest in weapons. We were very frightened, of course, that the Germans might have it first. And so we persuaded the British authorities to go ahead with the program.
Men Bohr afslår tilbuddet. Han mener, at i denne alvorlige situation er hans plads i Danmark. Desuden tror han ikke, at det er teknisk muligt at fremstille en atombombe. I 1943 sætter danskerne sig til modværge mod den tyske besættelse. Tyskerne indfører undtagelsestilstand og sætter racelovene i kraft i Danmark. Det lykkedes på få dage at få smuglet de fleste danske jøder til Sverige, og Bohr og hans familie må også flygte. Fra Sverige bliver Bohr og hans søn Åge fløjet til England, hvor man utålmodigt venter på Bohrs ankomst. Kort efter Bohrs flugt bliver instituttet besat. Tyskerne tror måske, at de kan finde oplysninger til brug for deres egen atombombe. I det krigshærgede London vil man straks have Bohr til USA, hvor arbejdet med en atombombe er i fuld gang.
For a time, there was some collaboration between the British and the Americans, and then the Americans found they could do it all perfectly well on their own, and they didn't want the British, and they shut the British out. And the British were very alarmed because they realized the whole significance of the atomic project and thought that they realized now that with Britain being bombed and all the strains on manpower, they couldn't do it at home themselves and that they must get into the American project. And it was only after a terrific hassle that Churchill managed to persuade Roosevelt at the Quebec Conference in August 1943 that the British should be allowed into the American project. So that when Niels Bohr arrived in England in September 43, this was a great, as I say, trump card for the British, because the thought that Niels Bohr, the greatest physicist with Einstein in the world, should be part of the British team in America was a great reinforcement of their strength in negotiations with the Americans.
I Los Alamos møder Bohr til sin overraskelse en række af sine tidligere medarbejdere og venner, som alle er beskæftiget med at fremstille en atombombe.
One of the great events in Los Alamos was the day Niels Bohr arrived. And Niels Bohr arrived there with Åge, with his son, and they had assumed names. I don't know why, because of security. He was called Nicholas Baker, and his son was called Jim Baker. And we always called him Uncle Nick.
There were a lot of worries by the authorities, in particular by General Groves, who was in charge of the whole atomic energy project, about security, because they thought that if it was known that Niels Bohr was coming to Los Alamos, people might be able to guess what was going on there.
Da Bohr ser omfanget af projektet, forstår han, at det alligevel er muligt at lave en atombombe. Men han bliver bekymret over de konsekvenser, bomben vil få.
Somehow, in this rather dreary atmosphere of warlike preparations, he came in like a revelation, and he tried to explain to us, although this is a terrible thing, but it may be the great hope. It may be that by developing such a weapon, wars may be impossible in the future.
Well, he was a general consultant. He did not do any detailed work, but he took an interest in the program, and people liked to explain to him what they were doing, and he made useful comments, and I believe in some cases he made some quite practical and useful suggestions.
I hele sit liv har Bohr været optaget af åbenhed og internationalt samarbejde i fredens tjeneste. Frigørelsen af atomenergien, mener han, har så vidtrækkende perspektiver, at det må være hele verdens fælles sag at kontrollere udnyttelsen.
He had to be, of course, careful to speak about political problems, first as a foreigner, and second because they are rather delicate and sensitive. Then we had small groups to discuss it without him and to go on. And that wasn't very much encouraged by the administration, because they thought we should only do our work and not get into politics and future plans. But we had to. We did it also. And this was definitely Bohr who gave us the occasion and the material to think about.
Bohr formidler sine bekymringer til præsident Roosevelt i Det Hvide Hus. Han mener, at russerne må orienteres om atomprojektet for at undgå rustningskapløb efter krigen.
A Russian project had begun in 1942 as a result of the initiative by a young, very young Russian physicist, and he had made a great discovery of spontaneous fission, and he wanted to get a Stalin Prize for it. But to put in for a Stalin Prize, he had to prove that the discovery was well regarded in the West. So he went to the library and looked through all the American and English physics journals and found not a single reference to nuclear physics. And from that, he was absolutely sure that an atomic project was in progress. And he wrote to Stalin. Nobody else would listen to him. He wrote to Stalin. That was the beginning of the Russian project.
Roosevelt har til fulde forstået Bohrs bekymringer. Han er selv af samme opfattelse og foreslår, at Bohr rejser til London for at tale med Churchill. Men Churchill er afvisende.
I think it was one of Churchill's bad days. He was obviously in a very bad temper. And I remember Niels Bohr remembered that a lot of the interview was taken up by a row between Churchill and Lord Cherwell, who was his chief scientific advisor and a great personal friend. But they were quarrelling, and I remember Bohr saying that at one stage Churchill said to Cherwell, "I command you not to talk about battleships." And I think that this spread over, obviously, into his talk with Bohr. He really didn't listen, and he didn't like Bohr. I think Bohr was conscious that he didn't like him. Bohr's mild philosophical vagueness of expression and his inarticulate whisper were not the kind of things that appealed to Churchill. He always told people to put everything on one sheet of paper and speak very concisely and so forth. So I don't think the auguries were good anyway.
Bohr er nedslået, men rejser tilbage til Roosevelt, som siger, at han selv vil tale med Churchill ved førstkommende lejlighed. Flere og flere videnskabsmænd i Los Alamos er bekymrede over bomben.
We regarded it as important that the statesmen and military leaders should be made to understand precisely what this new weapon was and what its consequences were. We knew that people like Oppenheimer were in touch with them, and we trusted them to explain these matters, and we trusted the political leaders as decent people to take responsible decisions. That, in retrospect, perhaps was a little naive.
I et brev fra den russiske videnskabsmand Kapitsa er Bohr blevet inviteret til Rusland. Churchill var orienteret om brevet, og Bohr foreslog, at han selv kunne kontakte Kapitsa og de russiske videnskabsmænd om atomspørgsmålet. Men på et hemmeligt møde mellem Roosevelt og Churchill angriber Churchill Bohr for spionage på grund af brevet fra Kapitsa.
What does he mean? He's getting letters from Russian scientists, and Churchill even went so far at one stage to say, you know, Bohr seems to be on the edge of mortal crimes, and possibly he should be locked up, in effect. So that this was one of the disastrous strands in a disastrous story of his interview with Churchill. But no more happened. I mean, that was the end of it, because, as I say, Bohr would never have done anything dishonorable. Never.
Roosevelt dør, og Truman bliver præsident. Atombombeprojektet er så velbevaret en hemmelighed, at ikke engang Truman er informeret om de nærmere detaljer, eller om Roosevelts samtaler med Bohr. Da tyskerne overgiver sig, mødes Truman, Stalin og Churchill i Potsdam i Tyskland for at diskutere den videre krig mod Japan. Under mødet får Truman besked om, at den første atombombesprængning er vel gennemført i Los Alamos. Efter forudgående aftale med Churchill fortæller Truman, kun i overfladiske vendinger, at amerikanerne nu har en kraftigere bombe mod japanerne. Men Stalin ved bedre.
Refugee Klaus Fuchs, who had joined the British project in 1941 and then gone to Los Alamos as part of the British team, was quite an important person at Los Alamos. It was found in the late 1940s that he'd given the Russians every single bit of information he knew, which was a lot.
Den 6. august 1945 bliver atombomben kastet over Hiroshima. Først i slutningen af august 1945 vender Bohr tilbage til Danmark og til instituttet, hvor de danske medarbejdere venter ham. Det er blevet hverdag igen. Det videnskabelige samarbejde fortsætter, men verden er blevet forandret af krigen og atombomben. Bohrs første forsøg på at skabe internationalt samarbejde om atomkraften er mislykkedes. Men han ser forhåbninger i det nyoprettede Forenede Nationer. Han arbejder videre med sine tanker om internationalt atomsamarbejde og gensidig kontrol i et åbent brev til de Forenede Nationer. I brevet gør han opmærksom på de alvorlige problemer og det ansvar, som menneskeheden står overfor ved udnyttelsen af atomkraften, og hvor nødvendigt det er at samarbejde på tværs af alle grænser.
By the time the open letter, of course, was published in 1950, it was the time of the Korean War. The Cold War was at its height, and no moment could have been less propitious for it. And I think because of this, it's tended to seem a rather woolly, just the kind of thing you might think from an aging scientist and so forth. But I think it was far more hard-headed than that.
Bohr saw the necessity of big physics on a large scale, like at CERN and other of these big institutions, because this was a continuation of his life work. He saw that it is necessary to have not only on a big scale, but on the international scale, because science goes over all limits of nationality or politics. And when Niels Bohr died, an era ended. He was the great creator of modern science. And somehow his death symbolized his life. It was in the midst of activity. He chaired a meeting, and then he went home where there should be a party in his house, and he was just lying down for a rest, and he never woke up. What a life and what a death.
The open letter, I think, embodies something very practical and something very idealistic. On the practical side, he foresaw many of the things that have happened in weaponry. He foresaw that the atomic bomb, the thermonuclear bombs would follow, that chemical and biological warfare, there would be a revolution in communications technology and so forth. And I think he realized that it was just not going to be possible for one country to keep a secret for very long. Therefore, why try?
Fordybelsen i sådanne problemer, i kilder til de misforståelser, der kommer op ved forbindelse imellem mennesker og forskellige kulturer. Det tør man håbe kunne vise vej til bedre forståelse imellem folkeslagene. En forståelse, der jo nu om stunder er mere nødvendig end nogensinde. Nu hvor videnskabens udvikling har givet rummer så store løfter for forbedring af menneskenes levevilkår, og som samtidig gør det mere nødvendigt end nogensinde, at vi på vores lille klode finder frem til veje for fredeligt samarbejde på den fælles menneskekulturs udvikling og fremgang. Det er ikke mindst inden for det videnskabelige samarbejde, at man kan håbe, at sådanne bestræbelser befremmes. I det vi her, måske mere end nogensinde noget andet område, føler, at man på forskellige grundlag stræber efter det samme mål. At forøge vores erfaring og uddybe vores kendelse af den natur, hvori at vi selv er del.